Hello and welcome to the 14th Understanding Class live stream. We are going to do chapter 8, the death of class debate. Today with us here in the studio, our virtual studio, connected from all over the place today, we have, let's go to Spain, where we have Esri. Esri, how's it going?
Hola, se llama Esri, ¿sí?
I hope you have your pop mic on.
Sí.
Your pop screen, yeah.
Estoy una turista basura en Barcelona, sí. I just said I'm a garbage tourist. Anyway, hi. I promise I won't do that the whole time.
Are you a tourist of garbage, or you are a really crap tourist?
Yeah, I was just thinking I was more trash as an individual, and I happen to be here. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. You're not perusing the bins. Okay. Now.
Certainly not. I just went shopping.
Not yet. Okay. Yeah, the money is going to run out tomorrow. Then you're going to be bin diving, right?
I don't know. I got a lot of Spanish hash. I've heard a lot about this over my life. Anyway.
Oh, you're smoking the hash. Well done, yeah.
Beautiful. I'm going to visit Walter Benjamin Garden, which they have one. Walter Benjamin is like this Frankfurt School guy, Jewish guy, sort of got into Messianic Judaism while smoking a lot of hash, after he escaped the Nazis. Kind of tragic ending, actually. But, the important thing is he smoked tons of hash and got really into Jewish mysticism.
Worse things could happen. Certainly in that time period. Okay, then we go all the way to the mangroves in Arizona with Sophia. How's it going? Sophia.
What?
How you doing?
Yeah, it's going good. I'm sleepy, but I'm good.
How come you're so sleepy?
Because I don't sleep. Well, okay, here's the thing.
Aww.
I do sleep, but I'm irresponsible and I stay up late playing video games.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So that's me.
Were you Anarchist Spain in Hearts of Iron 4?
No, I was playing Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War.
Hell yeah.
That is a deep cut.
It is a deep cut. It's a good fucking game, though. I'm obsessed with Fire Emblem now. But
what is it called?
Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War.
Fire of the Genealogy of the Holy War.
No. Fire Emblem colon.
Okay.
Genealogy of the Holy War.
Right. Okay. What's that when it's home now? Is this like some kind of jihad game or something?
Almost. You play as a waifu faction committing a jihad. No, it's basically
waifu jihad.
Seriously? Jihad. Yeah. No, it's basically a strategy RPG where you move units on the grid, and it's basically like D&D, more or less, except for like very anime inspired.
I actually I didn't teach at the school where Fire Emblem was first conceived, but I did do some workshops with students from there, and did go by the campus a number of times.
Oh shit! You should introduce me to the Fire Emblem creator. Just kidding. I know you don't know him, probably.
Yeah, Jeff. That guy can drink me under the table. Jeez.
Yeah, Jeff Emblem.
All of these jokes go over my head. Okay, and then we have Kyle in. Am I right in saying Winnipeg?
That's where I was born.
Oh, shit.
But no, you're off a few hundred kilometers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'm in Calgary.
Calgary, shitbags.
It is another city in the Canadian prairies. Yes, and we're in the middle of a snowstorm. As you would expect. Basically, we had a really mild fall, shockingly mild fall. But then Halloween rolled around, and I think the fairies of the Winter Court they were pissed. They're like, we've had too much of this autumn and kicked out autumn on schedule. And the day after Halloween, we just started to get the heavy snow.
Love to hear it. We in London here we had similar. We had only maybe last weekend we had 22 degrees Celsius, which is incredible. And but it's cold this weekend, and it's finally here just in time for all the gas to run out. Apparently, France have 108 days of gas in storage. In Germany, something similar. Let's play the lottery with the panel here. How many days of gas storage does the UK have? Okay, let's start with Esri.
Hmm.
Da-da-da-da,
Da-da-da-da. I don't know. Judging by how the UK has gone these days, let's see. We're talking double digits. Like, if not zero. If it's not zero, part of me will be surprised. But I'm gonna go with 30. We got 30 days of gas.
Okay, Sophia, where are you rolling in with? Mute yourself.
Sorry, I'm going to go. So as you said, 30, right? I'm going to do the Price is Right bullshit. I'm going to say 29.
Excellent, love it. Stab her in the face, why don't you? Okay.
Well, you don't know how the rules of the game work.
Kyle,
I will go with 14 days.
Okay, you are all too large. It's
fucking zero.
It's shocking when it's 9 days.
9 days, but I win because I was closest.
So, we are expecting like rolling blackouts in the UK now. They're starting to actively talk about it. So let's bring it on.
Show on the road.
I don't know what's going to happen, and I have to put out unedited episodes. I won't have any electricity. Yeah, okay.
You have to edit it by candlelight.
That's my excuse. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. UK's really getting medieval.
I'll be pouring candles into the PC, into the desktop. This should do it. Okay. Today, editing by candle. Okay. Today we have chapter 8, the death of class debate. I have all the slides done. I have completed all the slides for all of the remaining 5 chapters ahead of time.
Whoa.
Absolutely incredible.
Well, that's
it killed me.
Remarkable stuff.
It took like a week. Wow. Especially the chapter 12, which has got an incredible something like 59 slides, which we will never finish. Okay. It's not the death of class debate, it'll be the death of the Understanding Class series debate.
Yeah, well,
okay.
Our children or our spiritual children will end it at some point. It'll be like that church they keep trying to build here.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be like Genealogy of the Holy War.
Oh, yeah.
In what sense?
You're actually right. Well, you see, Tom, Genealogy of the Holy War is the first Fire Emblem game in which you play as 2 generations of people. You play as the first generation and then as their children.
Ah, okay. I see.
Hence the name Genealogy of the Holy War.
Wow, that is a really accurate name for a video game.
Yeah,
yes.
It's pretty intense sounding, that computer game, I must say. Okay, now let's get into this death of class debate. I'll take the introduction. Okay, in the mid to late 1990s and early 2000s, there was a short but lively discussion that came to be known as the death of class debate. In the context of capitalist triumphalism at the end of the Cold War and the marginalization of Marxism as an explicit framework for social criticism, the argument that class no longer had any explanatory power had particular bite. The 2 most forceful proponents of the death of class thesis, Jan Pakulski and Malcolm Waters, presented their ideas in synoptic form in their essay, The Reshaping and Dissolution of Social Class in Advanced Society. Who here knows who these Jan Pakulski and Malcolm Waters people are? And is anybody here, are they familiar with this actual debate before reading this?
I've heard reference to this debate, but I don't know much about it. As far as like Jan Paul Poopy and Malcolm whatever No, I don't know who they are.
Geez, that's a Polish name. Come on, Eastern, Poland. I guess, can we be racist against Poland? Not if you're in the UK.
There's too many Europeans on this show now. I can't just be racist to Eastern Europeans and feel okay about it, because it means something different if you live in Europe.
Those were simpler times.
Ugh.
I didn't really. I haven't engaged with like the sociological literature. I'm only familiar with like Euro-communist stuff, and that, like the communizer response to the Euro-communists who were declaring the death of class and going after gender, race, other kinds of social divisions, which did inspire a lot of very interesting Marxism. And I guess there's also the sort of Italian autonomist way of dealing with this that I think is a little better. We'll get into it.
I was sort of familiar with this stuff from like reading like Manuel Castells, and some other kind of like more famous sociologists, but not like I definitely wasn't deep into the sociological literature about this.
Yeah, maybe we should get a sociologist. No, I'm only familiar. I'm mostly familiar.
We had Bob on here, who's not exactly a sociologist, but has taught.
Oh, he's close enough.
Has taught sociology. Giddens, I think, is another person who's like really associated with sort of death of class arguments.
Yes, I'm familiar with Giddens and that whole period of sort of neoliberal triumphalism, or what have you. And the sort of marginalization of the entire like Marxist research, paradigm and program. That much I'm familiar with, but not the specific literature, not the specific sociology.
Yeah, like my only kind of interaction with it is I remember like a kind of a live friend of mine. There's some like famous UK kind of center right kind of philosopher, and he set up some like school, like
I remember that.
Do you remember him? What's his name? AJ something or CL something, some kind of name like that. And he was making this argument that my mate had picked up, was saying like, the working class doesn't exist. It only existed like like it was like some kind of thing that it was a historical class that was in the 1850s and it doesn't exist anymore. And that's like, I'm sure this is bleeding out of these goddamn debates. They're all part of this thing. That was kind
absolutely.
Is it AJ? I'm thinking of Rowling, but it's like something, like.
I don't remember. I just remember like back in the day reading like his columns in the New York Times that was like, this guy is setting up a school for lib shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, I can't remember his name. I will find it. Okay, let's keep going here. They defend a particularly stark conclusion that contemporary class analysis, that contemporary class analysts manufacture class where it no longer exists as a meaningful social entity. Rather than dismiss out of hand their claims, Marxist and Weberian class analysts need to take seriously the arguments that we are moving rapidly towards a classless society, or at least a society within which class has dissolved as a salient explanatory category. Wright believes a dialogue with their arguments can be productive for clarifying the nature of class analysis, the status of its explanatory claims, and the tasks it faces. Like, it seems kind of wild that this stuff can be really taken seriously in any real sense. Like, what does it say about establishment sociology that they can say things like class no longer exists as a meaningful social entity?
That has a substantial, ideological superstructural portion to it, I suppose. On one level, I don't think it is in our intuitions to be like, oh yeah, capitalism's evolving into a classless society. That sounds sane. Like, that sounds insane to me. On the other hand, I do think that it can be good for us to take it seriously just as a foil, because it's the most extreme form of this ideology that we live in. Capitalism is essentially a classless society. That
and
Noam,
I mean,
Noam Chomsky talks about.
It's worth noting that like Harden Negri's autonomism was basically this thesis, but just from like a sort of lefty revolutionary perspective, that like the multitude was already the classless society in actuality. It just had to realize its existence.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
like even on the left, like this shit was like very common. There were so many academics in that time who were like, yeah, I'm an autonomist. I like read Harden Negri, and that means I don't believe in class.
Right.
Oh yes, fucking pathetic. A lot of it. Sophia, did you have something to say?
I mean, I don't know. Pointing out how obviously silly that is, it doesn't feel like a good use of my time, honestly.
Come on.
Well, I mean, okay, like, yes, like, it's like saying the proletariat is already the class of society, except there's this class over it that exists. I mean, come on.
Right. Sophia, take the next section then for us.
Sure. Introduction. There is a tendency in debates over theoretical ideas connected to ideological commitments for the rhetoric to become more extreme and polarized than perhaps the authors actually believe. Statements of the form social class is in the process of dissolving. Let me start over. Statements of the form social class in the process. Statements of the form social class is in the process of dissolving tend to drift into statements like social class has dissolved. This kind of slippage occurs frequently in the
Pakulski.
Okay. This kind of slippage occurs frequently in the Pakulski and Waters papers. For example, they argue that the downward shift in the distribution of property blurs traditional class divisions, which suggests that the division is still present, but less sharply drawn. While immediately after they state that the downward distribution of property makes impossible the establishment of any boundary between classes on the basis of property, which suggests not simply that the class division is blurred, but that it has disappeared entirely. In Wright's judgment, the heart of their argument is not in these most extreme formulations, but resides instead in the weaker claim that class is no longer a powerful or salient explanatory category. Pakulski and Waters define 4 propositions that define the core commitments of class analysis. Wright tries to show that their characterization amounts to insisting that class analysis requires a generalized belief in class primacy, whereas Wright argues that class primacy is not an essential component of class analysis.
Okay. So, like, who of us here kind of like disagrees with Wright that class doesn't have to be the prime essential driver of stuff?
I mean, it doesn't have to be, but I think it is. I think even issues of other identities is taking the kind of intersectional framework, right? Like whatever intersections there are, they come down to impacting bread and butter issues in a way that makes that the most salient in people's lived experiences. If you're gay and black and you can't get a job and you're homeless, that is fundamentally a class issue. That is the most salient issue you have in your lived experience.
I guess. Oh, yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, I can agree with that to like the extent, or sorry, I agree with this idea that class isn't always primary, like in the same sort of way that Marx talks about like feudalism, where he's like, well, these class divisions, these divisions that based on the productive arrangements of society can be uh, largely obfuscated by the social arrangements that exist at any given time, right? Like, where he's talking about how like you don't really see the class nature of history until capitalism, because you have all this stuff about religion going on, you have all of these social divisions, sort of like sumptuary laws, all this kind of stuff about status that is significantly altering the distribution of the surplus. And so, yeah, I agree with it to that extent, but I do kind of think that, like, yeah, after you get civilization, class is probably the primary factor in creating the unequal social arrangements that we see over history. Yeah.
I'd say in general that, like, we mentioned intersectionality. I think that Eric Olin Wright kind of fits that mold rather well, because he is very interested in the way that, you have all of these different systems of oppression. And he's even very generous in extending like the research agenda of Marxism structurally towards different like oppressions. And I don't know, in the way that right wingers talk about cultural Marxism as like, damn it, they've like, put all these identities and they kept the Marxist structure. Right is sort of for this in a way that I love. And like, we'll look at feminism and, make the analogous argument in feminism that we shouldn't just be, looking for, feminists should not just be looking for equality of the sexes, but sort of abolition of gender, really. Like, he will go through that, and I think that's neat.
I think I agree with feminists that the creation of patriarchy predates the creation of class, and is a more I don't know if I would say fundamental, but at least as important as class, because it does have a historical primacy over class.
Well, this is where I think, so just to be a little bit blunt about it, often intersectionality theorists, I don't know, sometimes they sort of see everything as a big network system, but more often I tend to see them kind of seeing different systems interacting. And Wright is very much in that camp. He doesn't see gender and class oppression as really so relevantly related. Like, he has a whole section in his book, Interrogating Inequality, where he says that Marxism and feminism are two distinct research agendas, are not really related. Whereas, and that comes out of, again, there's the sort of Stalinist roots of intersectionality, but there's also that Euro-communist turn that is sort of the vanguard of, everything but class intersectionality liberalism. Whereas my love for the autonomous comes not from Hart Negri, who I don't know if that's autonomous, and fucking shoot me.
It was just that's what people were saying when they were calling themselves autonomists. I'm not saying that is all of autonomism.
No, you're 100% right, and that's kind of garbage to me. But I like the autonomous feminists who are trying to deal with gender as a labor division very seriously. And so I disagree with Wright's read on feminism and Marxism. I think they're intricately related. And part of that, for me, part of the way that expresses itself is that sexual freedom is sort of a consumer good, a bourgeois good, which is really obvious when it comes to transition. Like, people that have a lot of money, you can transition. versus people who don't have all those resources. I don't know. That's just one example. So yeah, I'm more in the camp that says that, you know, gender in general stems out of a labor division and is sort of this like whole, it's proto-class, like it's so intimately related, and processes of racialization are, I think, a little less directly related, but are like so close. For instance, anti-Black slavery comes out of the, you know, Arabian Empire. It's imported into Portugal and Spain by invasion. The same invasion that brings Aristotle and math and shit to Spain also brings anti-Black slavery. And what, you know, who develops the ideology of racism? It's slavers, right? Like people that are looking to steal people from one society to make them work in another. So I think being like, I don't know how to put this. I guess I am arguing for a kind of so-called class first, quote unquote. It's just that I also think that race and gender are really intimately, have this huge class basis. And it's not like class comes first, because very obviously gender comes first. Gender is endogenous to any of these economic units. If your society is small enough, you don't have the big kind of social class, but you certainly have, you know, people who can have babies, people who can't, and a whole bunch of customs around that.
Is it similar to that kind of thing that Kyle was saying, that the primary thing of capitalism was kind of like was it, I think Kyle, you were saying like was it a Weberian kind of an exclusion before you get the kind of continuous exploitation relationship, that we have a similar kind of a dance between feminism and class?
I don't know about that though, because the thing is that like, I think, you know, with that sort of like autonomous feminism, we can kind of like get at the root of like what gender is about by understanding the productive categories it constructs over history and prehistory. So it's not strictly about exclusion. It's also about creating ongoing productive relations between genders.
Yeah. So I think I disagree with Wright's understanding of what class primacy is, sort of, because he wouldn't include like reproductive relations around gender to be like a version, like an endo class. That's why I think of it, you know, you have like this internal, this like labor division internal to an economic unit. Like, for instance, Alan Carling is another analytical Marxist who, while Eric Olin Wright has a rational choice, while Eric Olin Wright has a like multi-systems social reproduction theory, which that's usually, those two things don't normally go together. Alan Carling has this rational choice like unity feminism, where it's like, it's one of the more interesting like Marxist debates on feminism, and everything's upside down. Like the hardcore feminist position is some rational choice theory, and then like the social reproduction theory, which is usually used to uphold some kind of unitary class gender theory, is arguing against class gender theory. It's like, yeah, the analytical Marxist debate around feminism and Marxism, mostly had by men, is super interesting.
The way I think about it, put simply, is there's kind of like the non-class forms of oppression that happen are colored by the mode of production you live under. Like gender-based oppression is the oldest, and it exists chronologically before class. There's no denying that. But the way gender-based oppression, or the way racism, or other forms of oppression are expressed are colored by the mode of production that they happen under. Gender-based oppression is not the same in feudalism as it is under capitalism, but it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, yeah, no, I just hit my sleep button on my keyboard and it sent my desktop computer fully to sleep for the last 2 minutes. I was trying desperately to get back on, so sorry if I've missed anything here.
Oh yeah, we just blew everybody's minds.
Oh shit, so like for me, like see, it's very hard to distinguish between like what is class and what isn't class, like what we're talking about. Say there's a comment here from Victoria Magna in the chat. Even in cases where you have socially obfuscated caste systems, you still see that the basis of those caste formations is over controlling who has access to and ownership of production resources. And like I think this is, this is kind of how I see a lot of the stuff that gets put down as not being class at the root is kind of still class. Like, if people talk about like, what say the troubles in Northern Ireland, say for example, they talk about how it was the Catholics versus the Protestants, but really it was over to do with like class relations that the Catholics were exploited more, had worse jobs, poor housing, didn't own the land, didn't have access to working in a lot of the different, they were excluded. It was legal to exclude based on religion from loads of types of jobs. So like, what on the front of it looks like it's Catholics versus Protestants, behind it was all like material class issues. There was I never heard like, an argument between like, a loyalist and a Republican saying, you transubstantiation motherfuckers, and then like, fuck you, consubstantiation prick, right? Never happened. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. But like you get shit like theologians from both sides arguing with each other, and then this being connected to like who gets more or less of the surplus, like this is there's like kind of seemingly disconnected conflicts that happen that are about sort of like redistributing the surplus at a remove, like a one degree of removal from the actual extraction. That's, I think, what Marx was talking about in his description of feudalism, like that, right? It's not that it isn't about the distribution of the surplus. It's just that at some level it doesn't appear that way, and the immediate stakes appear to be about something else, even though the actual consequence is about that.
Right. And I think, it's very hard to, like, I do kind of agree with Wright, though. And I think, like, a lot of the times, like, class is not the dynamic, just the driver of, say, what's going on in the society to an obvious extent. Sometimes it's other things that may have, like, maybe, like, second order effects of class or whatever, or maybe, say, not. But I feel like, I don't feel, I disagree so much with what Wright is saying. But then when I think about, like, say, for example, like, just like, say, value theory, right, which is really an extension of like class relations, right? And so, and we talk about like, how deindustrialization has happened, and the movements of capital, and the reproduction of capital across society. It's hard to take class out of that, and you would have to say that is the real driving force.
Yeah.
Esri,
yeah. No, I'm trying to process this, because this whole conversation reminds me of the essay on structural anti-Semitism and the essay on the Nazi Holocaust, the Shoah, by the Canadian Jewish Marxist Moshe Postone, where he takes to task a kind of like dumbass Marxist reading of World War II and anti-Semitism, where it's just like, you know, the Nazis are just blaming the Jews because they want to make money or something. I forget like the really dumb argument that he's attacking, which I have heard before. It's not like I've never heard it before. I've heard it from turbo tanks. I've heard it from like Beyond the Ultra Bordegists like types that I suspect have some fascists at their bookstore or something. Like, so it's not like a complete straw man. But what he says in response is very interesting, that because the Nazis were some kind of perverted sort of socialism, and because there was such deep anti-Semitism, even in the heroic days of the workers' movement in Germany, that many people in the Jews saw the incarnation of modernity and capitalism. And so trying to eliminate the Jews was this expression of, you know, trying to burn the value form in some way. And that was like a better Marxist reading of the Shoah, because he cites this really telling incident when, you know, things are getting very bleak for Nazi Germany, and they use all of these essential resources to put more Jews into death camps and try to kill them, try to kill as many as possible before the Soviets and the Americans liberate them. Because, you know, like, it tells you something about the way that class actually can form the basis of things while not being the only fucking determinant. You know, there's also this perverted fascist movement that, yes, was it a response to capitalism? Sure. But, you know, it got like, there's the nation state structure and like, you know, just the historical contingencies at the time that, you know, and then, you know, the symbolic way that, you know, the class interests express themselves. National class interests don't have to express themselves in a real cosmopolitan communist way. That can be quite nasty, right? Like, it's not A to B. Like, you know, it's not like, oh, cool, you know, I'm being oppressed and therefore, like, you know, solidarity forever. It's like so much more complicated than that. So there's a dumbass version of Marxism and class first Marxism, which I think a lot of people, I don't know, over the years might believe that I am into, because I try to make these arguments about class having this, you know, big basis. But I think those are terrible. I think those arguments are like more false than their like intersectional alternatives. So at least the intersectional alternatives understand to some degree why the Nazis would buy ideology so hard that they would try to burn all the Jews, as many as possible, instead of getting resources where they need to be to like beat the people fighting them.
Right. Like, I think you probably know this better than me, Esri, but I think I remember hearing is like when they were running out of like stuff to gas the Jews, the Germans would line or was that beforehand? They would line them all up so they could shoot a bullet through like 10 of their heads. It would go through their heads, something like that.
They did that. I think they did that stuff first, but it was but it made the Germans sad to shoot all the Jews. So they came up with really so they pioneered, you know, slaughterhouse techniques and stuff, run on IBM computers, which many contemporary slaughterhouses are. And yeah, they created the industrial death machines that revolt us more than, you know, normal atrocities. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's enough bleakness. I tell you, I went to Majdanek. Has anybody been to one of the camps before?
No, I have
went
not.
to Majdanek in near Lublin in Poland, and that was fucking, yeah, it's pretty fucking tough. Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. I'd have to have a lot of free time to do that. Like, I'm sure I'll do it someday, but like to devote an entire like, oh, it's going on a weekend to Auschwitz, like that would feel real weird.
Right. I think it's yeah, I don't know. It's fucking grim. Probably the grimmest thing I've ever seen. Okay.
I'm just coming up on my hash.
I'm glad to have brought it. brought it out.
This is my fault. I brought up Poststone. Poststone never makes people happy.
No, I like that analysis. I think that's a good analysis.
Yeah, that definitely tracks with what I've read about like fascism in Austria as well, and like the reaction to modernity, the sort of fascist like we reject everything mentality. Yeah.
And I don't know. One thing I was going to say, I was trying to look for it there. I couldn't find it, but like when I was reading there was some quotes of like Bernstein for the SPD and things he had said. I did a Bernstein episode with Rosa Luxemburg on the her critique of him, and there was like some of the stuff Bernstein was saying to the SPD in like their general meetings, whatever, and they were so fucking racist, man. I mean, they are ridiculously racist, and it's like how and that was probably the majority of the SPD. Let's be honest.
Well, how else did Nazi Germany happen?
Right. And so when people look back to the glory days of the SPD, man, there's a lot of fucking horrible shit that must have been said and done by the leading lights of who we think are like the greatest socialists that ever lived.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, like, I fucking love, I don't know, the Jewish Polish woman who was part of it.
Rosa,
and
yeah.
Very few other are really kind of worth anything. I mean, Karl Liebknecht, I don't know what his views on race were, but he seems pretty solid.
Yeah. Okay, Kyle, how do you fancy doing the 4 propositions? First one.
Yes, the 4 propositions. The trivium and the quadrivium.
We're getting biblical here.
Here is our quadrivium for class. All right. So the central tenet of Pekulski and Waters' critique is class analysis rooted in the Marxist tradition. But many of their arguments also apply to any form of class analysis that defines class in terms of the ownership and control over economic assets. They build their case around 4 general propositions abstracted from the literature on class. So the first proposition, the proposition of economism. Point 1, class is fundamentally an economic phenomenon. Point 2, it refers principally to differences in the ownership of property, especially productive property with an accumulation potential, and to differential market capacity, especially labor market capacity. Point 3, moreover, such economic phenomena as property or markets are held to be the fundamental structuring or organizing principles in societal organization. The first 2 statements are unproblematic. However, the use of the definite article "the" before fundamental implies that class is the fundamental structuring principle in society. No Weberian would sign up to this, and many contemporary Marxists would also shy away from such a categorical claim.
What do we make of that last third point there, Kyle? Like, because he's talking about economic phenomenon. We're not talking about how people self-identify of their like thinking about how they operate, whether it's class driven or driven by nationality or race or sex or whatever. We're talking about economic phenomena as property or markets are held to be the fundamental structuring or organizing principles in societal organization. Like, what type of Marxists think that is too strong a statement?
If you're Baudrillard, you probably would not agree with that.
Well, the central point here is the definite article "the," right? Thinking about it as a fundamental structuring or organizing principle. I would even go so far as like the most, maybe. But to imply that it is the only fundamental, I think, is a flaw.
Well, it doesn't say the only. It doesn't say the only, but it just says the fundamental structuring. Like,
but it does using a definite article and a singular noun there does imply.
Well, if he's not saying it's.
I mean, come on, Tom. This is an analytical Marxist we're talking about. You think that You think that his reading of English grammar is off?
Well,
you should check the logical translation. No, I'm kidding. I wish.
No, but like, what am I being a bit like? I don't know. Like, am I being dumb here? But like, when we're talking about like the fundamental structuring principle in society, like, the economic structuring principles. Like, are we not? Are we doing like? Do Marxists not? Is that not what a Marxist is essentially saying, that it's the economy that is the fundamental driver?
I think he's being more of a sociologist here than purely a Marxist, and the way that the phrasing here, and jokes aside about analytical grammar and all that bullshit, they're kind of right in that, like, you have to break this down and think of it like, break it down into symbols and think about it logically in that sense. And thinking about it sociologically, right, and just taking the text as is, the fundamental structuring or organizing principle, not the fundamental economic or economy is the fundamental or etc., but looking at the structures of society as a whole, not just economically, economic phenomena or property or markets structure society, right? I, as a Marxist, believe that it is the most important, but it is not the only one, right? And that's not exactly in line with how Bukowski and Waters are defining it. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense here.
I think the thing is, like, it's sort of like the base superstructure problem, and I would personally say, like, yeah, there are superstructural elements or elements you might not consider to be economic in this fundamental base, right? Literally, the fundament is the base, right? That's what it means. Mm-hmm. But I would still agree with the general principle here that economic phenomena, property markets, are the fundamental structuring or organizing principles in societal organization. It just doesn't mean like, oh, line goes up, therefore, Biden wins the election, right? Like, it is not that simple.
Yeah, there's two kind of ways of dealing with the base superstructure problem. One of them is the one that he references by G.A. Cohen in his essay, Restricted and Inclusive Historical Materialism, where Cohen restricts what the superstructure is, essentially. And instead of seeing, he uses the example, how many candles on the menorah, why are there 9 candles on the menorah? Oh, well, it's because of capitalism. Like, for a kind of very broad idea of how the inclusive historical materialism might work. And he argues for, and he revises himself, and he argues for this more restricted form. So restricting the superstructure is the first option. The second option, which I'm fond of, is to expand parts of the base. And a lot of post-structuralist influenced Marxists like myself find that excluding, the Darwinian structure of interpersonal power relations and sexuality, excluding that stuff from the material base is fucking insane to me. So that's my strategy there.
Excluding the relation to nature from the economic phenomena as property or markets is like absolutely bonkers, and like one of the worst, sort of like the cardinal sins of economics.
Right. Yeah, it buys into an ideological premise, right? And so I'm greatly in favor of really both strategies, but I think the second strategy is underutilized by Marxists because they kind of don't understand it.
I'm a firm proponent of both. You know what I mean? That's why I find that's why but maybe
But right excludes. Right isn't doing the second. So if you have the first one, then I think what he's calling class, it's not the only fucking thing, right?
Right.
Like if you're excluding, psychosexual power relations and interpersonal, like Darwinian shit, like then sure, it's not the only big thing happening. It's more like Sophia is saying, or it might be this dialectic between, our natural being and our, form of organization or something that forms the
right. And
the basis.
But even the notion of like trying to trying to extract what we're talking about there, say for example the stuff that Arnold talks about in Fight Like an Animal, right? Aggression tendencies and stuff like that, and taking them out of class relations is like, I suppose sometimes when I think of class relations, I just include a lot of those kind of dynamics into it, that help form these class structures. But I can see Wright's point if we're talking about like the way you are talking about it. I don't have problems with it, but it depends what you mean when you say like economic phenomena of property or markets. I suppose it entails a lot of shit.
Yeah, I guess if you were using a strict sort of historical definition of economic phenomena, like Wright is no doubt doing, he is obeying the split between economics and ecology, for instance. And also, the home economics is not part of that exactly.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you can look at it like history is fundamentally about who gets what people get what. But then you have to ask, like, who are considered to be people, right? Like, that is an important part of that equation.
Yeah, it's the domain, right? Like, if the domain is part of the answer.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what the chat has to say here. Let's have a look here. Girls4.xyz say, find your love in New City. Heart.
I mean, I have. Sure. Thanks, Girls4.
Yeah. .xyz. Okay, sorry for that.
Well, I mean, it's important to have. Listen, we can't discriminate against robots. Yeah. Come on, we've all seen Measure of a Man.
Oh dear. Okay, which one is Measure of a Man?
Data Trial. Data's on Jay's Humanity is on trial.
Yes.
Yeah. The one have you seen the weird chaser?
Yeah.
Maddox.
Have you seen that one with Joaquin Phoenix where he falls in love with his like AI chatbot?
Oh,
that's
God.
her, right?
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's quite good.
I have not seen it.
Did you see it, Kyle?
It's not bad. It's not bad. It was pretty good.
Spike Jonze, right? That motherfucker writes the most depressing things I've ever seen in my life. I love him as a director, but I don't want to know anything he thinks about. Like, if I ran North Korea, I would kidnap Spike Jonze and put a gun in his back and be like, make me believe in hope. Because his music videos for like the Beastie Boys and stuff are like amazing.
That Apple ad he did, woo!
Oh yeah, that shit was very life affirming and fun.
Yeah.
Let's keep it not decadent, Spike, huh?
Okay, Kyle, keep going here.
All right. Second proposition, the proposition of group formation. Point 1, classes are more than statistical aggregates or taxonomic categories. Point 2, they are real features of social structure reflected in observable patterns of inequality, association, and distance, which I believe he means social distance here. Like how many degrees of separation do you have? And then 3.3, so deep and fundamental are these cleavages that they form the principal and enduring basis for conflict and contestation. As before, the first two statements correctly identify commitments of most class analysts. The third statement, however, would be rejected by virtually all Weberian class analysts, and many contemporary Marxists would also demur from the statement in this unqualified and categorical form. Although most Marxists would argue that even when class formation and class struggle have been contained, there will continue to be effects of class relations on other forms of conflict. This does not imply the stronger claim that class cleavages constitute the principal basis for all conflict. To claim enduring and even pervasive effects is not to claim class primacy.
Yeah, I think that speaks to what we were talking about before. And so if you have this notion of class, you have to confront that there is this version of Marxism that, you know, it doesn't do the cool expansion of the base and still thinks this explains everything.
It's like in like early Marxist historiography, like when Marxists first sort of like got into history departments and wanted to find out how every historical conflict in history could be reduced to a class conflict. That's sort of the approach that number 3 is pointing out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was the like? So give me kind of like, can you give counterexamples for people who are listening here, Kyle, that might be thinking, well, what like of historical stuff where we were thinking like class wasn't the principal basis for conflict?
Okay. Israeli-Palestinian conflict? I don't know.
Yeah, or like you know, like the conflict between the English and Scottish crowns over a number of times. Like, you know, there are dynastic struggles there. There are certainly economic elements to the struggles, but like, does having one king or the other is that fundamentally about class? Not really, no. Yeah, it like, you can't really say that.
And
So, like,
to what extent is colonialism about class? Because I think it is, but you know, to what extent, right? Like, because that's a lot of wars. That's a lot of shit, right? Like, and it's not like there's no labor aspects to colonialism. There always is. Like, but whether it's, hey, let's enslave these people, or hey, let's kill all these people so we can, you know, take their resources or something. I guess that's not exactly labor, but that's still part of the economic, you know, realm, I suppose.
Right. And so are we extracting those economic processes from class?
No, I mean, I think the thing is, like, just as I was saying before, like, you can have struggles over the surplus that are not about class divisions, right? Because the surplus has already been extracted, and there's like the question of sort of rentier distribution among social categories. You can have conflicts that are about that secondary distribution and not about extraction in the first instance, right? Like, there's a lot of conflicts in feudalism that are not about the question of whether or not the peasantry should provide X amount of surplus to everybody else.
Right, but could they be I'm just spewing. I haven't read this stuff, right, so I'm just winging it here, Carl. But could they be about, like, say that if your lord was dominant over another lord, that they would be able to extract more surplus, and that would benefit where you live, say, to a certain extent?
Totally, absolutely, right? Because then it's a question of, like, within the nobility, how is the surplus being distributed? And then how are there like secondary benefits to everybody else who is a part of that domain?
Okay, I'm just kind of I don't know if I'm being dumb here, but I'm kind of trying to see why we wouldn't constitute that as some kind of class battle.
I don't think that's dumb. I think this is a hard question, and that's why I'm kind of for Wright's argument that, yeah, you know, Marxists might disagree on this stuff.
Yeah, and I think, like, basically what I'm saying is you can have intra-class conflicts within dominant classes that are of significant historical scope, right? That isn't about defining a particular boundary of extraction from labor. And then you can also have conflicts between social groups that are both dominant in the sense that they are not the ones performing the primary surplus production in society, right? So like you could have a conflict between, say, the feudal lords and the church. Like neither of them are actually producing the surplus. They're both parasitic on the surplus production, but they do have real conflicts with each other. And those do have like actual historical scope to them. Like they're significant conflicts. They're not just like petty things that aren't worth writing about.
Okay. Okay, so let's hit the next one then. Esri, do you want to hit some of these propositions?
Let's do it. The proposition of causal linkage. Class membership is also causally connected to consciousness, identity, and action outside the arena of economic production. Did I say one before that? Because if not, 1. 2, it affects political preferences, lifestyle choices, child-rearing practices, opportunities for physical and mental health, access to educational opportunity, patterns of marriage, occupational inheritance, income, and so on. This proposition is sound since Pakulski, right? Since I cracked open the vino once we started talking about
seriously. This is like a really easy Polish fucking name.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, did you grow up in a place where there were like hardly any Poles, or
no? There's actually tons of Poles where I'm from.
Wow. Okay.
I'm just crossfaded and feeling myself. So, all right. So since Pakulski and Waters do not asset here. Oh, Tom. How late were you up doing this?
I don't know what the fuck. What does that say? Since because of Waters do not.
It's a cert. It's a cert.
Okay. Because I usually try to silently correct those mistakes as I go, but I couldn't do shit here. All right. Since Pakulski and Waters. All right. Since Pakulski and Waters do not assert here that class must be the primary causal determinant of each of the explanandum. Okay. Each of the explanandum. Okay.
Explananda.
Well, I'm trying to think, but each is singular, right? Each.
You're right, but each of the explanations that each of the explanations.
Christ, you're right. All right, fuck it. I thought you were just like, never mind.
You took that really seriously, Tom. Fuck it. It's like, all right, fine. Next slide.
Fine. Next. Yeah. This proposition is sound, since Pakulski and Waters do not assert here that class must be the primary causal determinant of each of the explananda listed under point 2.
Fuck, I made another. I checked. I reread this today. Shows you, and I didn't even see one.
All of the proposition, therefore. Fuck. All right. Yeah.
All your base and superstructure belong to us.
Cute.
That's what it is.
So where do I start? Let's try that again. Cheers, everyone.
Here, let me check here. What is this one? All the proposition.
And therefore asserts. Yeah.
Therefore asserts is that
assert. Therefore assert, right?
Yeah, therefore assert. Yes.
Propositions therefore assert.
Hold on. So this proposition is sound. Okay.
Asserts. All propositions therefore asserts that access. All the propositions therefore assert that access to economically relevant. Okay, Grant. Sorry about that.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go slightly.
All the sex worker proposition you
belong to us. Belong to me.
Oh yeah. All the marriage propositions. All right. Let's try it again. This proposition is sound, since Pakulski and Waters do not assert here that class must be the primary causal determinant of each of the explananda listed under point 2. All the propositions therefore assert that access to economically relevant assets has a systematic effect, direct or indirect, on these kinds of phenomena. Wright wishes to add one caveat. The list of phenomena for which classes claim to have effects is almost completely open-ended. Most class analysts would qualify the proposition of causal linkage by saying that class matters more for some phenomena than others, and that for certain explananda, class might have negligible effects. Furthermore, the extent to which class matters for various explananda may itself be contingent upon various other variables, i.e., there may be strong interactive effects between the micro-level effects of class location and various macro-level processes. Class analysis would not disappear as a legitimate research program if, for some of these explananda, it turns out that class determinants were weak.
Okay, this seems all very uncontroversial. Do people agree?
Class is back, baby. Like, Wright wrote this book after a period where this stuff was out there. It's kind of not out there since then. No one's saying death of class now.
Yeah, you would have to be off your rocker. Like, it's staring you in the face, like literally everywhere you go.
Yeah, you can see like that the leftists have taken over like Twitter, and they're getting like the advertisers to stop paying. You know, like it's all kicking off.
Right, of course, yeah.
Those damn activists.
The
They
cultural
are the
have taken over Twitter and destroyed Elon Musk's good name.
Well, thank God that Elon Musk is saving us from the cultural Marxist postmodernist menace. Like
right before the election.
Oh man,
and he's going to save free speech. Did you realize?
I'm willing to make a pact here now. Like, we should all just give up Twitter just to kill him, just to burn him.
I already did it. I already did it, Tom. I already did it.
I've never been on Twitter.
Good. Just Facebook.
I'm gonna continue to tweet bullshit. I'm sorry.
You just gotta find another microblogging platform to use.
I tried Mastodon, but like I don't know who to hang out with. I know who not to hang out with.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't think Twitter is long for this world. I think it's.
I'm getting that feeling too. I certainly hope so. It's not been a good influence on anyone I know.
The day that the Queen died was the best Twitter day ever.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic.
It was like
that was.
It was like just like the springtime of the people on Twitter, and it was so good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like the memes were fucking fantastic.
Yeah,
you know,
it's all downhill from there.
Did you see that one of the Irish dancers in front of like fucking Buckingham Palace doing? Although it was from months ago, it's still fucking. That one made me laugh. Yeah. Why do you honestly think it could go bust? It could like.
Yeah. Mm.
Wow. Yeah.
If he overmanages it and does a really poor job and is like obviously like very hypocritical in how I'm free speech, but then he silences anyone who criticizes him, then yeah, like people aren't going to put up with that.
Well, that started already.
They laid off half the workforce yesterday.
Yeah, the management, the management stuff going on. Actually, it's kind of funny. A lot of tech people who pay attention to finance have been like, "Hey, there's big layoffs coming," and so this is this is like it's very interesting. Elon Musk is kind of concentrated that thought into one human being and just arbitrarily laid off half the workforce, including some not so arbitrary stuff like the human rights department, let's say. It will be interesting to see what his plans are, because I think it's going to look it's more or less going to make Truth Social obsolete, and may make Twitter kind of. And look, we all know Twitter is for two types of people that will tell you to kill yourself. One of them is blue hair, and the other, has like a permanent Roman salute on their arm.
Right.
And so it might just become a platform for one of those types of people, and that would probably kill
just
it.
the new Parler is really what I expect out of Twitter.
Like, Twitter, it's a weird one because, like, even the people who are really good on Twitter that are, they're good at their shit posters or whatever, they all seem to have a hatred for Twitter.
Well, it fries their brains. It hurts them, and their instincts cry out against it.
So, like, all it's taken is like just somebody to make them go, right, this is the final fucking straw. And without the shit posters, Twitter's nothing.
Well, it's taking away the one thing that was rewarding about it to them, the dopamine kind of feedback loop. If they're like silenced on it, or if people who criticize Elon Musk are silenced on it, then like, what's the fucking point? There's nothing there for them. It just hurts them.
If you can't make dank Elon Musk divorce jokes, then what's the point of Twitter? Like, really?
What is? Somebody so there's been a number of blue ticks have been changing their their handle to Elon Musk, and then like a picture of Elon Musk and saying things like, I drink my own urine, it makes my brain work better. And then like they've since got their accounts suspended. Even the blue ticks are fucking going, fuck this shit. Gotta love it. Okay. Next one. So take the last of these propositions there, Ezra. Keep going.
All right. The propositions of transformative capacity. 1. Classes are potential collective action. Classes are potential collective actors in economic and political fields. 2. Insofar as they consciously struggle against other classes, classes can transform the general set of social arrangements of which they are a part. 3. Class therefore offers the dynamic thrust that energizes society. 4. Classes are the principal collective actors that can make history. Statement 1 accurately characterizes most forms of class analysis. Wright would only modify it in one respect. Except metaphorically, classes as such are never literally collective actors. It is organizations like political parties and unions that act strategically in economic and political fields, not the classes themselves.
Okay, so I put a little bracket like saying here, is this true? Like if we look, say, at the whole thing of, like, say, the George Floyd riots and stuff and protests, like, they're not really political parties, unions acting strategically or anything.
That's right.
It seems like just a raw class as a class, not in the sense of which Wright is saying here.
Well, is a riot in response to a racist police shooting part of the base or not? Right. Like, that's sort of the question that will help you answer that, more or less, because, like, I think it is. Obviously, this is what expansion of the base people say, and therefore, it's not just organizations that are capable of constituting some sort of, will of collective actor. Like, there is an emergent possibility there, outside of organizations.
Like the Paris mob was not, quote unquote, a organization. It was an actor in history, but it was not like, organized in the sense that a political party in the modern way or a union is. Just that these things are typically quite short-lived, right? These sort of like class as a disorganized class acting are generally quite short-lived, but doesn't mean they can't make history. That's kind of silly.
Right, but perhaps the claim is more like, but because they're not an organization, they don't like speak with one voice. It's just an aggregate of individual wills.
So I
or
think
something.
That's silly.
Yeah.
I think it's most accurate perhaps to think of the like political parties and unions as being more potential representatives, and to the extent to which they are good or bad representatives of class interests is in question. Some would argue that they're always bad. I think political parties personally are usually a little bit more sus than unions, although unions can be quite suspect. But they have the benefit of having a structural longevity, whereas, while a riot and protests and things like that, the Paris mob are more pure expressions of class interests. Like Kyle pointed out, they're quite short-lived. Well, but also they're quite short-lived, but they are more often than unions or parties. I would argue more often they make history. It's usually the mob that makes a decisive, kind of mark the beginning of a revolution more than a party.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
I'm still chewing on the sort of like unity of action principle that happens when you're in a formal organization with longevity versus, when you are at an autonomous protest. There's no even like, I don't know, if you're part of some sort of organization, there's a certain, level of protocol where you agree to, it's not exactly democratic centralism, but, you agree to be part of the organization even when you're dissenting, more or less. Therefore you're kind of like part of what the organization is doing in some kind of corporate way. I guess really this distinction rises and falls on how real that is to you. Whereas in an autonomous protest, things may happen that not only, you may like oppose or disagree with, or it's not what you would do, but there's actually no corporate body, right, that guarantees that guarantees some kind of relationship between you and the situation, I suppose.
Yeah, the conditions for its reproduction as a social entity are quite precarious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it's capable of acting in a way that others aren't. Like, I don't know. It's like when the Bolsheviks used to do bank robberies, right? Like the party needed them, but there was actually a bunch of people that were genuinely against the bank robberies and kind of wish they would stop, but they couldn't stop it. And so as part of the organization, they were still kind of complicit. Whereas if you're just in a big mob and, someone breaks into like, let's say, there was an autonomous action and, a break off of the Paris Commune breaks into the Bank of Paris following the world historic advice of Marx and Engels. I guess the Paris Commune's a bad example because it's more organized than a regular mob. But if, that happened now, like, I don't know, if a football team lost in Europe and there's just a big mob and, some of them broke into the Bank of Paris, right? Very plausibly, a bunch of people involved with it, would not be complicit with robbing the Bank of Paris in a way that a Bolshevik party member is sort of complicit. Like, even though it's not, even though it's, they didn't like agree to it, there's this organizational bound that has continuity. And so these things are related, I think.
I think it's like you do get instances of collective punishment where, like, classes as classes are punished. Like with just all the killing and after the Paris Commune and that kind of stuff. But it's typically a matter of like political expediency more than it is of like justified jurisprudence. you know, like, oh, like you can't really like say like every member of the working class in Paris deserved to die
Right.
because of their participation in the commune. But like, as a matter of suppressing that class for like decades, that was like seen to be politically expedient. And so, you know, just let loose the dogs of war, right? It's a different kind of responsibility that's attributed to participants.
Mm.
It's funny you should mention the Bolshevik bank robberies. I don't know if any of you remember, there was like a massive bank robbery in Belfast in 2004. And supposedly it was the IRA, and what they were going to use the cash for was for basically paying off. Like if you were like some IRA guy who was probably, you know, doing some like robberies and shit to raise funds and taking a cut on the side. This was like supposed to like pay off all of these like kind of fucking people around. But they robbed so much money in this one bank job that they it was too much for them to wash. They robbed, I think, £26 million in cash. Like, can you imagine? They filled up a truck with cash, and then they came back and filled it up again. They filled up a truck.
Whoa!
Right?
They went
And
back for seconds.
Yeah, and you want to see where they did it. It was like right in the center of like it's an alley off the main square in Belfast. I mean, it was like robbing like from downtown fucking Manhattan, just off Wall Street on an alleyway, and they filled it up, and it got so much that they had to get the money. They had to like hide it all over the place. Like hiding £26 million in like £10 notes is fucking a big job. And there was one guy about a week later in Cork, and you know, which was like 300 miles from where the robbery was done, and he got nervous. He'd obviously got his hands on some of the cash. They'd given him some of this cash, and he got nervous, and he burnt it, and he put it into his fireplace. And he thought the guards were coming for him, so he burnt it. But didn't the with the heat of the fire, when he put in the money, it sucked all the money up out of the chimney, and it went all over the neighborhood.
No.
Oh my god!
So there was like fucking like 100 grand in fucking tenors in British £10
Made it
notes
rain.
floating around. He literally made it rain. Fucking
That-
That's a better way to get rid of it than fucking burning it. It's going to some good use.
yeah.
I will say that's a powerful argument for, you know, one person constituting the collective will, I suppose.
What do you mean?
They say history isn't made by great men. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, they robbed a bank and sort of comically accidentally distributed it among the masses. I mean, that.
Right. Yeah. It was
Wow.
like, I'm looking at it here. Like, there's a big. I think nobody got sent down for it. I don't think.
Sometimes there is justice in this world, Tom.
What's the fuck up?
Like literally a £26 million. How good must their fucking like their organizational discipline have been to not have one leak for a £26 million robbery? Fantastic.
Bless them.
Did you finish the? Sorry, because I had to step out for a second. Did we finish this page, or did we?
We finished the page, but we just got tripped up on statement 1, and there's a lot in there.
Are you sure? We read
We
statement
still
2.
got 4 right and
Yeah.
statements 3 and 4.
Yeah.
To do.
Oh, no, you're correct. I mean, I did read 1 through 4. Yeah, all right.
Keep going.
4 right, statement 2 would be acceptable to most strands of class analysis, so long as the word transform is taken to include something like modifications in the rules of the game, and not simply revolutionary ruptures in the game itself. Statements 3 and 4 are much more contentious because of the assertion of class primacy. While classical Marxism certainly affirmed the thesis that class struggle was the motor of history, most contemporary Marxists would qualify such claims by stressing the importance of a variety of enabling conditions that make it possible for collectively organized class forces to have such system-shaping effects. Few Marxists believe that the collective capacity for radical transformation is automatically produced by the contradictions of capitalism. So 2, 3, 4.
What do we think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair. Like, I think that, like, it's more that the contradictions of capitalism produce the potential for collective capacity, but they don't produce collective capacity automatically. Capacity as like a real like agency, a capacity to act effectively. It does not produce that automatically.
Yeah. I think right is really good at, like, I don't know, when you're looking at any piece of work, you really want to grill the assumptions going into it. And so if you have to assert statements 3 and 4, in the more contentious sense, in order to make the death of class plausible, then maybe it's because you've erected a straw man. Although we all know with Marxism that there are many walking straw men who exit the feedback loops and keep that opinion. So,
Right.
but yeah, I think right is more or less, correct.
Straw man to the left of me, straw man to the right.
Here I
Okay.
am, stuck in the middle with you.
Yeah. Stuck in we are centrist now, are we?
Ugh.
There we go.
Radical centrists. Ugh.
Radical centrists.
Just
Is
kidding.
that what Stalin was?
I kind of think so,
The
yeah.
radical center, yeah.
Sort of, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
if you really take the fucking, like, Second International spectrum seriously, apparently the center is like, what the hard right would be in the Overton window or something. I don't know.
Okay. Let's hit 4 propositions. I'll do this with myself. Okay. So, while Pekulski and Waters do accurately identify some central strands in class analysis, they consistently slide from a reasonable description of propositions that affirm the relevance of class to much stronger and contentious claims about class primacy. Excuse me. They seem to believe that without the claim of class primacy, there would be no point at all to class analysis. For right, class analysis need not universally privilege class over all other social divisions in order to justify its research. God almighty, its research programs. Class analysis is premised on the view that class constitutes a salient causal structure with important ramifications. There is abundant evidence to support this claim. It is a much more contingent claim that class processes constitute the most important cause of particular social phenomena, and a far more contentious and implausible claim that they constitute the most important cause of everything. Well, I think it's fair to say that a lot of the times and when society has had big, massive shifts, it's when class has done the action, but that class is not always operative as this mega obvious driving force. Is that a reasonable way to think about it?
I think that's reasonable. I think, yeah, I kind of agree more with the expanding the base kind of definition, though, and thinking of as intersectional processes as kind of like a blending of, like, taking, for example, like the New Left and the kind of like anti-racist stuff in the United States, particularly with the Black Panthers. That wasn't devoid of class. In fact, like the way that class and race intersect and that kind of component of civil rights is quite instructive. Or more recently, like the Black Lives Matter, there isn't like an obvious economic component, but if you think more materially, there's nothing more bread and butter than being killed by cops. Like, you're dead. Right. So there is an obvious kind of material component, a base component, if you will, to that struggle.
No, the Panthers are an interesting example because they have the post-Maoist, view of the lumpen in relation to Black struggle. So they have they really do frame race in terms of class in the United States in this vital way. And, if I made it sound like all the intersectionalists, post-Stalinists were, people that only saw these things as different systems, it's not true. Like, there's a bunch of like unity theorists, and people that really think, it's all one system of oppression, more or less.
All one.
What about something like sort of a similar time, like the sexual revolution, like it's a major upheaval in society, right? But is it primarily class driven? I definitely see the material basis for it, but I don't know if I would say it was primarily a class driven upheaval.
Well, gender is a very interesting case because I think the way Esri put it earlier is the most, well, it's fascinating as like a consumer good. You have different problems with sexual-based oppression or gender-based oppression and different economic class strata, and you have access to different privileges and rights based on what class you're in.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
And like, as far as like the hippies went, there were lots of people who said, oh, they're all just like middle class. Right. There was definitely like a class perspective on the sexual revolution, but I don't know if it was primarily a matter of class conflict. It just seems like something that was animated by a lot of class conflict that was going on around it at the same time, as well as some material conditions that were very peculiar to that situation.
Well, yeah, is sex, class, right? Like, is control of the means of human reproduction, and the birth, like, the sexual revolution is not possible without birth control, right? Like,
it's not possible without birth control. I don't think it's possible without the baby boom either. Like, I don't think it would have happened without the baby boom.
What do you mean by that, Kyle?
There's just so many young people who are like open to changing society at that period of time, at the same time that birth control becomes a reality and an availability. And so it's like suppressing it was a lot less plausible than if you had, say, like, in more recent times, like a massive boomer generation that is old and conservative and a much smaller younger generation, right?
Yeah, I just I guess I'm very fixated on how society changes since the 1970s and how women's relationship to labor works. And I understand that, the golden age of capitalism with the class compromise, where you had, a housewife role. I understand that that's not like an eternal, law of history, nor is it really the natural state of capitalism. There's many women that are being ground down by the, factories Marx was talking about in Capital. But since the 1970s, the relationship between women and reproductive labor has been severed because of a new technological capacity that is distributed on a class basis, among other things.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. You're right that it's not maybe the primary driver if you're talking about Eric Olin Wright's version of class as endoclass, as outside the productive economic unit. But if you are folding in internal reproductive relations into the base, which I am in favor of, then I think it's, I don't know, it actually assails the foundations of class.
Yes, that's true. That is true. And yeah, like, I think it's just hard for me to say it was primarily a class phenomenon, even though like class was very deeply implicated in everything about it. Yeah.
Yeah, exoclass. It's not primarily an exoclass phenomenon. So yes, no, in that respect, I agree.
Wait, now we've had endoclass and exoclass. Explain these variants.
That's my own pet jargon for trying to think of class relations in the normal sense as exoclass outside of the economic unit. Traditionally, class is between economic units, and gender for the most part, including queer shit, as long as people aren't being thrown out of their homes for being queer, is internal to the economic unit. It always is, 50% of the bourgeoisie are women, like it's just how it's going to be, unless NBs really make some ground, and then, then it'll be 45% or something.
Bourgeois envies of the world reunite.
Shit.
No.
And NBs cannot even unite amongst themselves, let alone on a class. Perhaps only class spaces can bring them together. And exo-class spaces, pardon me. I'm being a little bit of a rad femme this evening.
Rad femme. Okay.
Rad femme, though.
Right. I'm wondering, because the next section, it's kind of like a breakup. It's like a point where it's like, I don't think we're going to finish today. We've done 8 slides and there's 8 more, and it's a kind of a logical break point.
Yeah.
So
It's
maybe
been 90 minutes,
Yeah, maybe
100
we'll
minutes.
leave it here, because there's all this evidence shit we have to get through and complexity. So
Good place to break off.
Right. So we'll say bye to the chat, and we'll see you next time. We got Alex Marquez, and we've had Kevin Chewy, who was complaining about a snowstorm, and we've had Victoria, who said Zizek sniff ideology, which I did notice you did pronounce.
Ideology.
You did pronounce one word, Esri, in a Zizek
And
voice.
so on.
And so on. I was
That's
like,
my girl,
"Brother."
Vicky. That's my girl, Vicky.
But also, you pronounced some word with kind of like a New York mafia.
Oh yeah, I
background.
did that.
Yeah. No, when I drink, my inner Long Island sound comes out. I'm not from Long Island, but my mom has a strong Long Island accent. So when I drink, I sort of sound a little bit like Fran Drescher, just a little bit.
Yeah, I think you said causal or something.
Yeah.
Primary causal determined. I don't know.
People tend to know where I'm from in the United States when I say the word coffee. Coffee.
Yeah,
Oh
coffee.
yeah, that's very strong.
Yeah. I don't think of it that way. I can say coffee if I need to, but Christ.
Oh
Coffee.
yes. We also have to remember to say thanks to girls4.xyz.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you for
Help me find love.
livening up the chat.
Okay, sure. We'll see you next time. Same bad channel. And we'll sign off. Good luck.
And
And good luck